World War II was burning across Europe. Germany was full of fear, smoke, and silence. In one military camp near the border, German soldiers lived every day with tension. Bombs fell far away, but fear lived close. Nights were cold. Men were tired. Many soldiers smoked cigarettes to calm their shaking hands. But in this camp there was one strange rule. A rule that made no sense. Officers repeated it again and again. Never light a cigarette near these women. No one explained why. The soldiers whispered among themselves. Who are these women? Why only them? What happens if we smoke? But questions were dangerous in wartime Germany. So most soldiers stayed silent. The women arrived one evening just before sunset. They walked into the camp quietly. There were 6 of them. They wore dark coats and gloves, even though the weather was not very cold. Their faces were pale, almost white. Their eyes were dark and empty, like deep holes with no light inside. They did not smile. They did not laugh. They did not look at anyone. The camp became silent as they passed. Some soldiers felt cold even though the sun was still in the sky. Private Erich Weber, a young German soldier, watched them from a distance. He was only 22 years old. He had joined the army with pride, but the war had changed him. Fear lived inside his chest now. He noticed something strange. When the women walked, their shadows looked wrong. The shadows moved slowly like they were late. Erich shook his head and told himself it was just his tired eyes. That night the warning came again. An officer shouted, "Remember, no fire, no matches, no cigarettes near those women. This is an order." Still no reason was given. Erich did not like orders without answers. Late at night the camp was quiet. The moon was hidden behind clouds. Guards stood far apart. The women stayed in a separate building near the trees. Erich stood alone near a fence. His hands were shaking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cigarette. Smoking helped him forget the war even for a moment. He remembered the warning. He looked around. One of the women stood nearby, her back facing him. She was very still like a statue. Erich laughed softly to himself. "Just stories to scare us," he whispered. He pulled out a match. Scratch. The match did not light. He tried again. Scratch. Still nothing. His heart beat faster. On the 3rd try. Fire click. The match burst into flame. For one short second, the light pushed back the darkness. And Erich saw something that made his blood turn cold. The flame touched the woman's face. Her skin did not look normal. Dark lines appeared across her cheek, like cracks in dry earth. Her eyes reflected the fire, but not like human eyes. They shone too bright, too sharp. Her shadow on the ground moved in a strange way. It stretched and twisted like it had a life of its own. Erich's breath stopped. His hand began to shake. The woman slowly turned her head. Her face was calm. Too calm. Her voice was quiet but strong. "Put it out," she said. Erich wanted to run. He wanted to scream. But his legs would not move. Other soldiers noticed the light. They turned and froze when they saw the flame. No one spoke. Fear filled the air. The woman stepped closer. The fire showed more. Her eyes had no warmth. No fear. No mercy. Erich dropped the match. It died on the ground with a small hiss. The darkness returned. But the feeling did not leave. The woman leaned close and whispered so only Erich could hear. "You were warned." Then she turned away and walked back into the shadows. The soldiers stood in silence. No one laughed. No one spoke. That night, Erich could not sleep. He kept seeing the face in the fire. The skin. The eyes. The shadow. He finally understood something terrible. The warning was not for discipline. It was for survival. One small flame could expose a horror Germany wanted to keep hidden. And the fear had only just begun. The morning after the forbidden match, the camp was unusually quiet. Soldiers moved slowly, their eyes darting nervously. Erich Weber could not stop thinking about the woman in the dark coat. Her face, her eyes, the way her shadow had moved, it haunted him. He was not alone. Other soldiers whispered about strange things they had noticed. "Did you see how she disappeared into the night?" one man said. "Her shadow, it didn't move right," another added. No one wanted to admit how afraid they were. Fear could make you look weak. And in a German army camp during the war, weakness was dangerous. The women were more active during the day now. They moved in groups almost silently through the barracks. They never smiled, never laughed. And most strangely, they never seemed to have shadows. Soldiers started noticing it. During morning drills, a young recruit noticed his own shadow touching the ground, stretching long in the rising sun. Then he looked at one of the women walking past. Her shadow, there was nothing. The sun hit her perfectly, but the dark line on the ground that should have followed her steps simply didn't exist. He froze. When he mentioned it, the other soldiers laughed nervously. Shadows? Don't be silly, they said. But deep down they felt a cold dread in their stomachs. Eric had the same feeling. He watched them closely from a distance, pretending to polish his rifle. Every move they made seemed unnatural. When they passed under the trees, leaves did not rustle. When they entered the sunlight, the brightness didn't touch them fully. Rumors began spreading in the camp. Some soldiers said the women were cursed. Others whispered that they were spies for some secret Nazi experiment. No one really knew. No one wanted to ask. One evening, Eric decided to follow one of them. He waited until nightfall when most of the soldiers were asleep. He crept behind the woman he had seen by the fence the night before. Her steps were silent, almost floating above the ground. Her coat moved without sound, and her hair never reflected the moonlight. She entered the forest beyond the camp. Eric hid behind the trees and watched. She stopped near a small clearing and turned slowly as if she sensed someone watching. Eric froze. Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. He wanted to leave. He knew he was risking his life. But something inside him made him stay. Curiosity or maybe fear made him want to see more. Suddenly, the woman lifted her hand. A faint blue light appeared in the air like a small flame but not from fire. Eric's heart raced. She moved her hand over the light, and it bent around her fingers. The air seemed to twist, almost alive. Eric swallowed hard. This was not human. He stumbled backward, but a dry branch snapped under his boot. The woman's head turned sharply. Her eyes locked on him. For a moment Eric thought she would scream. But no sound came. Instead she spoke, her voice soft, calm, but filled with authority. "You see too much," she said. Eric froze. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to run. He wanted to vanish into the darkness. But he could not move. The woman turned and vanished into the trees as silently as she had appeared. Eric stood alone, trembling. He realized the stories were true. These women were not normal. They were something else. Something terrifying. Over the next few days the soldiers noticed more strange things. A young cook dropped a knife in the kitchen. When he looked up, one of the women had appeared silently behind him. He felt a chill. The knife was still on the floor, but she was gone. No one had seen her move. Another soldier reported that she walked past a lamp at night. The lamp flickered, but her figure remained dark, untouched by the light. Her shadow was still missing. Eric tried to warn the others, but most soldiers laughed at him. "You're scared. Relax," they said. But he could see the same fear in their eyes. No one wanted to speak about it openly. Fear made people silent. Then one night Eric saw something even worse. He was patrolling near the women's quarters when he heard soft singing. He followed the sound and saw 3 women standing in a circle. Their hands moved in perfect rhythm. Blue light floated above their fingers. The air seemed to hum around them. Eric held his breath. He felt his knees weaken. One of the women turned and their eyes met. Eric felt like his mind was being pulled inside her gaze. He stumbled back and fell. The women did not chase him. They just watched. Their shadows, still missing. The next morning the camp commander ordered more warnings. Soldiers were forbidden to speak about the women. Orders were strict. Do not go near them. Do not look at them. Do not question them, the commander said. Eric realized the danger was growing. The women were not just strange, they were powerful. And whatever secret they held, it was terrifying enough that the highest officers were afraid of it. That night, Eric could not sleep. He kept seeing their faces, their eyes, and the way shadows did not touch them. Something was coming, something worse. And he knew it was only a matter of time before the horror would touch everyone in the camp. The warning was clear. The women were not ordinary. And the soldiers had no idea what would happen next. The fear in Germany was growing. And the shadows of these women were still missing. Days passed, but fear in the camp only grew. Soldiers whispered in corners, eyes wide, hands trembling. Every shadow, every sound, every rustle of leaves made them jump. And the women, they moved with a silence that was almost unnatural. Eric Weber could not stop thinking about what he had seen. The blue lights in the forest. The missing shadows. The cold, empty eyes. Something told him these women were not just strange. They were something else, something terrifying. One evening the camp commander called a meeting. Soldiers gathered nervously in the mess hall. Their faces were pale. The commander's tone was sharp and urgent. "You have all seen the women," he said. "You know they are different. You do not understand their purpose. And you never will. Obey the rules. Stay away. Do not speak about them. You will survive if you follow orders. Disobey, and you will not. No one spoke. A heavy silence filled the room. Eric felt a chill run down his spine. The words confirmed his fears. The women were dangerous, but the commander's warning suggested something darker, something hidden. That night, Eric could not sleep. He decided he needed to know the truth. He waited until the camp was quiet. Guards patrolled far apart. The women's quarters were lit only by dim lamps. Eric moved silently, hugging the walls, his heart pounding. Every step felt like it could be his last. He reached the edge of the forest where the women had disappeared the night before. Shadows twisted under the moonlight. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The air grew cold. A faint blue glow appeared ahead. He followed it, careful not to make a sound. And then he saw them. 3 women stood in a small clearing. Their hands moved in strange patterns, shaping the blue light into swirling shapes. Sparks floated in the air. Their eyes glowed, reflecting the magic, or science, that no soldier was meant to see. And then Eric saw something even more terrifying. Behind the women, hidden in the darkness, were machines. Strange, metallic devices with wires, tubes, and flickering lights. Some were attached to the women's arms and backs. Others floated in the air, humming softly, connected by glowing blue energy. Eric's mind raced. These women were not natural. They were created. He remembered old rumors he had heard in the camp, stories of secret Nazi experiments, of attempts to create perfect soldiers and spies, of using science to give humans unnatural powers. He had laughed at the rumors before. Not anymore. These women were the product of those experiments. Humans had been changed. Their bodies were enhanced, their minds sharpened, their abilities beyond comprehension. And the blue light, the missing shadows, the unnatural silence, it was all part of the experiments. Suddenly one woman turned. She looked directly at Eric. Her eyes glowed brighter. She did not scream. She did not call for help. She only stared. Eric froze. He felt as if the woman could see inside his mind, read his every thought. He stumbled backward, knocking over a small container on the ground. It clattered loudly. The women turned as one, their movements fluid, perfect. They raised their hands. The blue light pulsed. The machines hummed louder. Eric felt the air tighten around him. His lungs burned. His legs shook. "You shouldn't be here," one of them whispered. Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried authority that made Eric's knees weak. He tried to speak, but no sound came. The woman stepped closer. The glow of the machines illuminated her face. Dark lines streaked across her skin, almost like cracks in porcelain. Her shadow, still missing. Eric realized the truth. These women were weapons. Perfect, silent, deadly weapons. And the Nazi command had hidden them from the world. No one knew their full power. No one could stop them. He stumbled backward, falling to the ground. The women did not move forward. They seemed to watch him, almost studying him, almost curious. Then one of them spoke again. "You have seen too much. Leave or you will not return." Eric scrambled to his feet and ran. His heart pounded so loudly he feared it would give him away. Branches scratched his face and arms. The forest seemed endless. Behind him he could feel them watching, though he dared not look back. When he reached the camp, he collapsed near the fence, gasping for breath. Soldiers passed by, unaware of what had happened. But Eric could not forget. The images burned in his mind, the glowing eyes, the missing shadows, the machines humming softly in the dark. He knew one thing clearly: the women were not ordinary humans. They were weapons of fear. And the camp, and maybe all of Germany, was unprepared for their power. The next day, whispers spread among the soldiers. "They are more than human," some said. "They are something else." Eric tried to warn them. But the soldiers did not want to hear. Fear made people silent. And secrets were better left buried. But Eric could not stop thinking. He knew the truth now. The women were not just spies or soldiers. They were a secret unit, created in darkness, enhanced in ways the world should never know. And one day their power would be unleashed. Until then, the warning remained. Never light a cigarette near these women. The experiment was ongoing. The fear was real. And the mystery was far from over. The days in the camp grew darker, colder, and heavier. Soldiers moved like shadows themselves, heads down, hearts filled with silent terror. Whispers about the women were everywhere, yet no one dared speak openly. Every man knew fear lived not only in the bombs but in the presence of these women. Private Eric Weber could not stop thinking about what he had seen in the forest. The glowing eyes, the missing shadows, the machines, the blue light swirling in the air. Sleep had abandoned him. Every sound, every crackle in the camp, made his hands shake. He felt as if someone or something was always watching. Eric realized that to survive he had to understand them. Fear was dangerous, but knowledge could be more powerful. That night he waited. He watched the women's quarters from a distance. The moon was hidden behind clouds. Mist drifted across the ground, making everything look blurred, unreal. One woman, the one he had seen by the fence, the leader perhaps, stepped quietly out of the building. Her movements were fluid, almost hypnotic. She walked toward the forest. Eric followed, careful not to make a sound. Every step he took felt like it could be his last. He remembered the warning, never light a cigarette near them. This time he did not dare test it. He simply moved in the shadows, desperate to learn the truth. The woman stopped at the clearing where Eric had seen the other women before. This time more of them were there, 5 standing in a circle. Their hands moved in strange patterns, weaving blue light that floated like fireflies in the air. The machines hummed softly, wires glowing, energy twisting around their bodies. Eric's heart pounded. He could not look away. This was no ordinary experiment. This was something far beyond human understanding. Suddenly, one of the women stepped forward. She raised her hand and the blue light wrapped around her fingers. She closed her eyes, and the air around her shimmered, almost like heat rising from a fire. Eric felt a pull in his chest, a magnetic force that made him stumble. Her eyes opened, and this time, Eric saw her face fully. It was horrifying. Her skin was pale, almost white, but not natural. Dark veins glowed faintly beneath the surface, moving like flowing ink. Her eyes were unnaturally sharp, reflecting the light of the machines. Her lips were pale and her expression blank. No emotion, no humanity, nothing he recognized. And yet there was intelligence. Cold, sharp, terrifying intelligence. Eric realized something that made him shiver. These women were not just soldiers, spies, or tools, they were something in between human and machine. Something enhanced. Something dangerous beyond comprehension. He stepped back, but his foot snapped a branch. The sound echoed in the clearing. The women froze and the blue light pulsed as if sensing him. One of them slowly turned her head. Eric's heart nearly stopped. "You are far too curious," she said, her voice soft, yet commanding, echoing in the silent forest. Eric tried to speak. I just wanted to." His voice trembled, barely audible. "You should not be here," she interrupted. "Curiosity is deadly. You have seen more than you should. Remember this night. Remember our warning." Her eyes glowed brighter, piercing through the darkness. Eric felt as if she could see every thought in his mind. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. If he panicked, he would die. Then she stepped closer and Eric saw the truth fully. Her movements were perfect, precise, inhuman. She did not breathe the way humans did. Her body seemed too smooth, too calculated, and her shadow, still missing, made her feel unreal, almost untouchable. The other women moved closer in a circle, creating a wall of blue light. The machines around them hummed louder, energy twisting like living electricity. Eric realized that if he stepped forward, they could destroy him without even touching him. One of the women spoke again, almost whispering, almost singing. "You have seen too much, soldier. Remember this night. Tell no one. Disobey and you will not survive." Eric nodded, though his body shook uncontrollably. He understood now that the warning was not superstition, it was survival. And the secret of the women was more horrifying than anyone could imagine. He backed away slowly, keeping his eyes on the glowing figures, until the forest swallowed him in darkness. He ran blindly through the trees, stumbling over roots, cutting his hands on branches, until he reached the edge of the camp. Eric collapsed near the fence, gasping for breath. His mind was racing. He knew he could never tell the others what he had seen. No one would believe him. And even if they did, it would only bring more danger. From that night on, Eric watched the women more closely. He observed how they interacted, how they moved, how the machines responded to them. Every detail confirmed his fears. They were more than human, faster than thought, and deadly. And he knew one thing. If the Nazis ever decided to unleash these women fully, no army, no country could stand against them. Eric's fear became knowledge. Knowledge became obsession. And obsession brought a terrible burden. He could never unsee what he had seen. The women, the machines, the blue light, they were a secret unit. Hidden in the darkness, enhanced and terrifying. And Eric Weber, a simple soldier, was now the only one who knew their true power. But even knowing was dangerous. Every time he looked toward the women's quarters, he felt their eyes on him. He knew they could see him even in the dark. And he understood fully. This was a war not just of guns and bombs. It was a war of secrets, fear, and something that no soldier had faced before. The truth was clear. The women were the ultimate weapon, and the horror they carried was only beginning. The camp had grown restless. Fear was everywhere, but tonight something felt different. The air was thick, heavy, and electric. Even the wind seemed to carry warnings. Soldiers moved cautiously, glancing at the women's quarters, but most dared not speak. They all knew, the horror lurking there could strike without warning. Private Eric Weber paced near the fence, his mind replaying the last encounters. The glow of blue light, the missing shadows, the machines humming in the darkness, it all haunted him. He could not stop thinking about the women, about the secret power they held. Tonight, he had a terrible feeling that something was about to happen. And he was right. At first it was subtle. A low hum, almost inaudible, came from the forest. The women stepped out, moving together silently. Their hands traced strange patterns in the air, and the blue light began to glow brighter. The machines around them flickered and pulsed, energy twisting like living electricity. Then the first sparks appeared. It started as tiny flickers near the edge of the forest. Sparks jumped from the trees, catching dry leaves on fire. Smoke curled into the air. The soldiers woke from their restless sleep, shouting and scrambling to find the source. Panic filled the camp. Guns were drawn, helmets clanged, but no one could see clearly. Eric ran toward the chaos, heart pounding. Flames danced across the barracks as if guided by unseen hands. The women moved through the fire without fear. Their shadows were still missing, their skin glowing faintly in the flames. Each step they took seemed to spread fire, yet they remained untouched. Screams pierced the night. Soldiers ran blindly, tripping over each other. Barracks burned, and the smell of smoke filled the air. Eric tried to shout warnings, but his voice was drowned out by chaos. He could see the glow of the blue light among the women, bending around them like invisible shields. Then it happened. One of the soldiers, too close to the flames, froze. A woman approached him. Her eyes glowed brightly in the firelight. Her hands moved slowly, and the energy from the machines pulsed toward him. He felt a force lifting him, crushing him, freezing him in place. His body trembled, but no one could help. Within seconds he collapsed, unconscious or worse. Eric realized with horror that these women were untouchable. They could control fire, light, and energy. They were the perfect soldiers, the ultimate weapons. And tonight they were proving their power. The fire spread rapidly. Barracks, tents, and supply depots ignited one by one. Soldiers tried to fight back with water and sand, but the flames leapt and twisted, almost alive. Panic turned into terror. Soldiers ran in all directions, shouting, screaming, and tripping over each other. Eric ducked behind a fallen tree trying to breathe. He watched as the women moved like ghosts through the flames. Each step they took seemed to leave the fire untouched, but everything around them burned. Their eyes glowed, their hands traced invisible patterns, and the blue light from the machines pulsed with deadly energy. One of the women stopped and looked directly at Eric. He froze. For a moment the chaos seemed to fade. It was just her, the fire, and the hum of energy in the air. She raised her hands slowly, and the flames near him twisted, curling toward him like serpents. Eric felt a chill that went through his bones. He wanted to run, but the forest was full of fire and smoke. The heat burned his skin. He fell to the ground, covering his face. He could hear the screams of soldiers, the crackle of fire, the hum of the machines. The night was alive with destruction. And then a scream louder than all others rang out. One of the women had stepped too close to a fallen machine. Sparks erupted, blue light mixing with fire. She did not scream or flinch. The energy around her expanded, creating a wave that sent soldiers flying, knocking down tents and trees. Fire spread faster, and the camp became a burning hell. Eric crawled through the smoke, trying to stay alive. Every step brought him closer to the edge of the forest. He knew if he could reach the other side he might survive. But he could not stop looking back. The women were still moving through the fire, unstoppable, untouchable. Their shadows were still missing. Their eyes still glowed. Hours seemed to pass, though it could have been minutes. Finally, Eric reached a small trench at the edge of the camp. He collapsed, coughing, burning, terrified. Around him the camp was almost destroyed. Soldiers lay injured or unconscious. Flames licked the sky, smoke darkened the moon, and the women disappeared into the forest as quietly as they had arrived. Eric's body shook. His mind was numb. He realized something terrifying. The fire was not random. The women had controlled it. They had chosen who lived, who fell, who survived. And now, the secret of their power was undeniable. The next morning the camp was quiet again, but fear had grown stronger. Soldiers whispered about what had happened, but most could not explain. Some believed the women were ghosts. Others thought they were experiments gone wrong. Eric knew the truth. They were not ghosts. They were the ultimate weapons. And Germany and the world had no idea what was coming. The fire had shown their power. It had shown the soldiers their own helplessness. And it had proven one terrible thing. The women were not just part of a secret unit. They were the nightmare hidden in the heart of the camp, the living terror that could destroy everything in a single night. Eric looked at the sky, black with smoke, and whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." The night of fire had begun, and the horrors of the secret unit were far from over. The morning after the night of fire was silent. Too silent. Smoke rose from the ruined camp, curling into the pale sky. Soldiers wandered among the wreckage, eyes wide, faces pale, shaking from fear. The destruction was total. Barracks, tents, and supply depots were gone. Some men had survived by hiding. Others were unconscious or injured. Eric Weber stumbled among the ruins, his clothes burned and torn, coughing from the smoke. His mind was still racing. He could not forget the glowing eyes, the missing shadows, and the way the women had controlled the flames. Every step he took reminded him of their power. Every sound made him jump. The camp commander had called a meeting immediately. Officers and surviving soldiers gathered in the mess hall, tension thick in the air. No one spoke at first. The commander's face was pale, his usual strictness replaced by panic. "We have a problem," the commander said. His voice shook. "The women, they are uncontrollable. Their power is beyond our understanding." The room was silent. No one dared speak. The officers exchanged fearful glances. "Orders from Berlin," the commander continued. "We are to erase them. Destroy the women. Destroy all records of the experiment. Burn the machines. Do whatever it takes to hide this secret. No one must survive to tell the story." A murmur ran through the soldiers. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others swallowed hard, realizing the weight of what they were being asked to do. Eric's heart sank. He understood the truth. The women were not ordinary humans. They were weapons. Perfect, deadly, unstoppable. And now the Nazis wanted to erase them. "Are we going to kill them?" one young soldier asked, voice trembling. The commander's eyes were hard. "Yes, they are too dangerous. If they remain, the experiment will destroy us all." Fear turned into horror in the hearts of the soldiers. Some had seen the women closely. They knew it was impossible to stop them. They had witnessed their power, their speed, their control over fire and energy. How could they destroy something that was almost not human? Eric thought of the blue lights, the machines, and the missing shadows. He thought of the soldiers who had been thrown aside or burned during the night of fire. He felt a heavy guilt. And worse, he understood something that made him tremble. Some of the women had not attacked intentionally. They had followed orders, protected themselves, defended their own lives. The destruction of the camp had been part fear, part defense. The officers gave orders quickly. Teams were formed to hunt the women, destroy the machines, and burn the forest if necessary. Soldiers were armed with guns, explosives, and flamethrowers. Maps were drawn. The women's positions were marked based on the survivors' observations. Eric joined one of the teams, his hands shaking as he loaded his rifle. His mind raced. He wanted to obey orders, but a part of him feared the consequences. Killing them would mean facing something far beyond human understanding. They were more than soldiers. They were nightmares given form. Night fell again. The teams entered the forest cautiously. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made them jump. Shadows danced in the darkness, but Eric's eyes searched for the women. The glowing eyes he had seen before were nowhere, but he knew they were close. He could feel their presence. Suddenly, a faint blue light appeared through the trees. One of the women stepped forward, her movements fluid, almost hypnotic. Machines hummed faintly, pulsing in the darkness. She looked around, her eyes glowing in the night. She had sensed them. Eric froze. The soldiers around him shouted and moved forward, but their movements were clumsy, uncoordinated, driven by panic rather than strategy. The woman raised her hand and the blue light expanded. A wave of energy knocked several soldiers to the ground. Explosions from the flamethrowers scattered sparks, but she remained untouched. Eric realized with horror that the orders were impossible to carry out. The women were not just weapons, they were untouchable. Any attempt to destroy them would only bring more death. One of the officers fired his gun. The sound echoed through the forest. The woman tilted her head, almost curious, and a wave of energy pulsed from her. Trees bent, branches snapped, and the soldiers were thrown aside like toys. Eric clung to a fallen tree, heart pounding, unable to believe what he was seeing. In the chaos, one woman moved closer to Eric. She stopped a few feet away and whispered softly, almost like a warning, "Leave, or you will not survive." Eric nodded, understanding. He had no choice. The orders could not be followed. To obey would be death. To disobey might also be death, but survival required wisdom, not guns. The officers called for retreat, but the fear and confusion were overwhelming. The surviving soldiers ran blindly through the forest, leaving the women and the machines untouched. Flames licked the edges of the trees. The night was alive with destruction and terror. Eric stumbled to the edge of the forest again, gasping for breath. His mind was numb. The orders had failed. The women were still alive, more powerful than anyone had imagined. And the secret of the unit remained untouchable, hidden in the shadows. The soldiers returned to camp, defeated, terrified, and guilty. They had been given a task impossible to complete. They had witnessed power far beyond human understanding. And they knew one thing for certain: the women were not just a threat, they were the future of terror. Eric looked back toward the forest, toward the shadows where the women had disappeared. He felt a chill deep in his bones. He knew that even if the war ended, the secret of these women would not. They were alive, hidden, waiting, and untouchable. The orders to erase them had failed. But the lesson was clear. Some secrets were too dangerous to control. And some powers were too terrifying to fight. The war raged on, but the secret unit remained hidden. Germany's armies moved across Europe, battles were fought, cities burned, and soldiers died in thousands. Yet, in the forests near the ruined camp, the women lived, silent, deadly, untouchable. Their power had been revealed once, during the Night of Fire, but no one outside the camp knew the truth. Private Eric Weber survived. He returned from the forest that night, shaken, burned, and terrified. He could not tell anyone what he had seen. No one would believe him. The officers had failed in their orders. The women had survived. And the machines, the blue lights, and the power of the secret unit had vanished into the shadows once more. Eric tried to live a normal life, but the memory of their eyes haunted him. Their missing shadows, the glow of the machines, and the way they had controlled fire remained burned into his mind. He could not sleep. He could not rest. Every sound, every whisper of the wind, reminded him of what had happened. Years passed. The war ended. Soldiers returned home. Cities were rebuilt. The world tried to forget the horrors of the past. But Eric never forgot. He moved quietly, always aware. He carried the secret of the women with him. He told no one, not his friends, not his family, not even himself in his waking dreams. The warning, the old, simple warning, was clear in his mind. Do not light a cigarette near these women. It was more than superstition. It was survival. One small flame had once revealed the horror. One match could have cost him his life. And now, even years later, he understood the power of that warning. Eric sometimes walked through forests, places that reminded him of that night. He looked at shadows, at lights flickering through the trees, at the quiet paths where the women might be hiding. He never saw them again, but he knew they were there, watching, waiting. Rumors began to spread in small towns near the old camp. Stories of strange women who could vanish, who moved like ghosts, who were seen only in fleeting glimpses. No one knew the truth. People dismissed the stories as war tales, nightmares, or superstition. But those who had survived like Eric knew better. The women had survived the war, untouched and hidden. The experiments had worked. They had become something more than human, more than weapon, more than legend. And their power remained a secret the world could never fully understand. Eric carried the weight of knowledge like a burning flame inside him. He remembered the soldiers who had died in the Night of Fire. He remembered the panic, the flames, the blue light, and the hum of the machines. He remembered the eyes of the woman who had stopped him in the forest and whispered that he had seen too much. He remembered the warning. It was simple, but it had saved his life. And now, many years later, Eric found himself walking near the ruins of the old camp. The trees had grown taller. The ruins were almost gone, swallowed by nature. The wind whispered through the branches. He paused. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, shadows that did not belong, a faint glow of blue light in the distance. He smiled faintly, knowing the truth. The women were still alive. The power remained. And the warning lived on. Eric whispered to himself, as if speaking to the past and the future at once. Do not light a cigarette near these women, and never forget. The secret remained. The terror remained. And the world would never know the full story. Somewhere in the forests of Germany, the women watched silently, untouchable and patient. They waited for the world to forget, for fear to fade, and for someone to make the mistake that would reveal them again. And when that moment came, fire, shadows, and blue light would return, as terrifying as it had the first night. Eric turned away, leaving the ruins behind. He knew the world would never be the same, not for those who had seen them and certainly not for the women themselves. The night fell, quiet and dark, but the memory of that warning, one cigarette, one small flame, would live forever. And with it the horror remained.